Well, school started several weeks ago, so lots of activities are underway. Football, cheerleading, twirling, the Western Airs marching band, volleyball orchestra, choir, and a whole lot more. Schools have so much going on, so many opportunities to learn. That's exactly what school's about, right? It's about learning. It's about gaining knowledge and skills and experience. It's about preparing young people. It's about increasing their potential to go out and live meaningful and productive lives. So what do you think would happen if a student showed up to school who thought she already knew everything? Maybe some of you teachers had her in a class once, I don't know. But what if she came to school every day and never listened to anything any of her teachers ever said? What if she joined the band but didn't listen to the conductor, never played the first note on her instrument? Can you imagine what it might be like if she walked into calculus class, never opened her book, didn't care anything about theorems or proofs, never worked a single problem? That would be a problem. Failure would be the outcome. There's no other option. Whether it came from arrogance or ignorance or something else, a student who acted like that, if she's ever going to reach her potential, she needs to be saved or delivered from herself. For the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about deliverance, God delivering his people, the Israelites. When God delivered them from the Egyptian army by parting the waters of the Red Sea, their immediate response was to worship God together. After that, they had a great opportunity. They walked with God. And for 40 years, as he led them to the promised land, they got to see his power and love for them up close and personal again and again as he provided everything they needed. That's why they weren't afraid to walk straight into the raging waters of the Jordan River as it was flooding over its banks. They didn't know what God had in mind, but they believed if God told them to do it, he would get them through it. And he did. As soon as their feet touched the water, you may remember, the river stopped flowing until every Israelite was across and safely on the other side. And there, on the other side, they received unbelievable blessings from God. They began to live abundant lives beyond their wildest dreams. But that's not the end of the story. God's plan for the Israelites continued on. God wanted them to share their wilderness experience with others, to tell people of every nation about him, about his power to deliver, about his patience with wayward people, about his unconditional love, about his mercy and his grace. God lovingly holds the entire world in his hands, and he wants the entire world to know it. And he wanted to make this known through the people of Israel. That's why God told Abraham many centuries earlier, I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you, and all the people of the earth will be blessed through you. God chose Abraham and his descendants, the Israelites, and he blessed them. Not because he liked them better than everybody else. God chose them because he wanted to use them to bless people everywhere. God chose them so they could be a gift, God's gift to the rest of the world. And there was no better time for the Israelites to get started than the moment they entered the promised land. It would have been easy. All the memories of what God had done for the previous 40 years were so fresh, and they had a really great starting point. Sometimes people miss this. They had a great starting point. At that moment, all the people in the surrounding nations had already heard about God stopping the waters of the Jordan River. They knew God made it possible for the Israelites to get to the other side, and they were terrified. They'd never heard of a God like that, never heard of such power. So they were shaking in their boots or their sandals or whatever they wore on their feet. But the Israelites did not seize the moment. They didn't begin telling people about God when they could have had the greatest impact. What a missed opportunity. All those foreigners, they knew God was powerful. They knew God was real. But they had no idea God loved them and wanted to bless them the same way he blessed the people of Israel. They didn't know that. Time passed, years, centuries, and the Israelites never did get around to telling the other nations about God and his love for them. Sadly, they turned inward. They got proud and they strayed so far from God, they forgot that he was the one who got them where they were. He was the one who gave them the abundance that they were enjoying. They were so out of touch with reality, so lost, they actually thought they were responsible through their own efforts for all the good things going on in their lives. But they couldn't make it rain any more than we can. They couldn't cause a single seed to sprout and grow, much less produce the abundance that was in their fields, the abundance in their herds, the children in their homes. They couldn't do any of that. Their power, like ours, was so limited they couldn't guarantee their own next breath, their next heartbeat, or anything else. They were God's people in the land God gave them, enjoying the blessings God provided, but they forgot God. Thankfully, God didn't forget them or give up on them. Instead, he intensified his efforts by coming to them in person. Jesus came into the world so God could walk among the Israelites again, this time physically. Jesus came so God could find them and save them, and then through them, save all the people of the world. Jesus came to teach about God's amazing love, to teach that we, created in his image, are supposed to love just like he does. We're to love God and each other, even people who don't like us, even people who hate us. Love your enemies, he said. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, offer the other one as well. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt either. Give to everyone who asks from you, and don't demand your things back from those who take them. Treat people in the same way you want them to treat you. That's real love. And that's what God wanted Israel to share with the rest of the world. So that's what Jesus came to teach. And one day, as Jesus was teaching a large crowd this very lesson, he asked them a question. The question is recorded in Luke chapter 6. It's going to be part of our Bible reading this morning. Please stand as you're able and follow along as I read Luke chapter 6, verses 46 through 49. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? I'll show what it's like when someone comes to me, hears my words, and puts them into practice. It's like a person building a house by digging deep and laying the foundation on bedrock. When the flood came, the rising water smashed against that house, but the water couldn't shake the house because it was well built. But those who don't put into practice what they hear are like a person who built a house without a foundation. The flood water smashed against it, and it collapsed instantly. It was completely destroyed. This is the word of the Lord. Please be seated. Jesus asked this crowd why they referred to him as Lord. It didn't make any sense. They didn't do what he said. If they really did accept him as Lord, they'd listen to him. They'd jump if he said jump. They'd love the way he said love. They'd act on his words. They'd put them into practice, whatever they were, when they heard him speak. But the Israelites of Jesus' day didn't know God the way their ancestors did when they crossed the Jordan River. They didn't have that same faith because they quit walking with God. They They just didn't know him anymore. That's why in their pride, they stopped listening to God. They became very arrogant and even more ignorant. They knew so little about God, they didn't realize how little they knew. That's why they didn't understand Jesus was sent by God, was God in the flesh with them. Since they knew so little about God, they didn't believe the words of the prophets that made it very clear. To put it in terms of school and education, they failed. They failed to be the people God wanted them to be. Failed to be the gift God intended them to be to the world. But God did keep his promise. He did bless all the people of the world through Abraham's descendants. He did it through one descendant in particular. Any guesses at his name? It's Jesus. Jesus truly was and is and always will be God's gift to the world. The greatest gift anyone could ever receive. While he was here, Jesus gathered some followers and he taught them everything they needed to know. Then he commissioned them to go out into the world telling them, you will receive power. You'll receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth. Jesus' followers were to become his witnesses. They were to tell others about him. They were to continue his ministry. They were to take his message to the ends of the earth. They were to become God's gift. They were to become God's gift to the world. Have you ever thought about Jesus' followers that way? Anybody ever thought about Jesus' followers that way? Have you ever thought about the church that way? Or yourself that way? That's what we are. That's what the church is. God's gift to the world. Now for some people this is a pretty dangerous idea. I can imagine some people, I don't mean to brag or anything, but the facts are the facts. I'm kind of a big deal. I'm God's gift. God's gift to the world. There are people like that. Thankfully, none of them are here. At least I hope not. But for other people, for most people, for people who can keep it in perspective, for people who can remember they are nothing without God, this idea is actually empowering. God's followers who have been delivered from sin and death and are blessed with new life, every single one of us, we have something to give. Our gift is to be God's gift to the world. Our gift is to teach the world through what we say and do about God's love. This reminds me of a man. We lived in the same town for a little while. I don't remember his name, but I remember how he used to talk about going to the bars. He didn't go to them to drink. He said he went there to sit down and strike up conversations with people who were there to drink. After listening to him, I realized the truth of the matter is he really wasn't there to have conversations with people. All he did was talk at the people, and in a very rude, arrogant, judgmental way. He told everyone he could get to listen that they were going straight to hell simply because they were in a bar drinking. He didn't know anything about them. Never asked about their lives or their problems. It was pretty obvious he didn't care. He just assumed they were bad because of where they were and what they were doing. He never told the people in these bars that God loved them. He never invited them to his church, to his home, to a better way of life. He was anything but God's gift to the world. Not at all like Jesus, who did not come to judge, but to save. Now, I knew another man named Tim. He used to run sound equipment at the church I served at the time, and he also used to go to a bar, to a pool hall. He went with his wife. Tim enjoyed talking with people. He listened to their stories. He learned about their lives. He was there for them, and they knew it. So they shared their problems with him, and he really made a positive difference in many of their lives. He asked me if we could form a church 9-ball team to play at this pool hall / bar, and asked me if I'd play on it. So every Monday evening for the entire fall, I shot pool in that bar. And I got to see firsthand and be a part of the ministry Tim and his wife had going on. The need there was so great, and the love expressed was pretty amazing. We shared God's love with lots of people who definitely needed to hear about it. Some of them came to our church. Some professed their faith. Faith in Jesus was seen in some pretty incredible ways at a recent trial in Dallas. There'd been a lot of emotional testimony for several days in a difficult case in which a female police officer was charged with the murder of an innocent man. Somehow, she mistakenly entered the wrong apartment, shot the man who lived there, thinking that she was in her own apartment, thinking he was there to cause her harm. The brother of the man she killed sat in the courtroom and told her that he forgave her. Then he asked the judge and was given permission to walk over to her and give her a hug. They both cried. It was a beautiful moment. At the end of the trial, after sentencing the police officer to 10 years in prison for murder, the judge, Tammy Kemp, left the courtroom for a few moments. When she returned from her chambers with her personal Bible, she walked over to the police officer and handed it to her. Then she humbly hugged the police officer and even went so far as to open the Bible and suggest some passages where she might begin reading. Powerful moment. No doubt that judge was being God's gift to that woman. In a much less dramatic but just as important way, we have a chance. We're going to have a chance in a few weeks to share God's love with lots of people right here when we host Trunk or Treat with all the games and food and fun activities. It's going to be a time when we as a church can show people of the community we care about them. It's a time when we can interact with them, do our best to show them we love them and that we love God and that we love them because we love God. It's a time when we can invite them to come back to our church for worship and for other activities. It's going to be a time when we can be God's gift to them, to everyone who comes. We can also be God's gift in our own homes, to our own families, to our children and grandchildren, by reading stories to them from the Bible, by bringing them to worship and other church events, by listening to them and encouraging them, by being the loving, patient, gentle parents and grandparents God knows we can be. We can be God's gift to our siblings, parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles. We can be God's gifts to our neighbors by being kind and generous, by helping them when we can, when we have the opportunity, by being friendly, by sharing our faith, by inviting them to our church home. We can be God's gift wherever we go, God's gift to the world. But we have to have faith. The type of faith that comes from walking with God, the type of faith that enables us to seize the moment and tell people about what God is doing in our lives. And we'll have that faith, and we'll be amazed by what God can do through us when Jesus is the foundation of our lives, when everything is built on Him. Remember what Jesus said? I'll show what it's like when someone comes to me, hears my words, and puts them into practice. It's like a person building a house by digging deep and laying the foundation on bedrock. When the flood came, the rising water smashed against that house, but the water could not shake the house. If you listen to Jesus, if you put his words into practice, if you love the way he loves, you'll stand like that house. You'll stand strong when the world itself seems to be shaking all around you. And as you help people find safety, comfort, peace, hope, and life in Jesus, you will be God's gift to the world. Amen.